Kimberley has been in music for quite a long time, and all I can say is she's a very talented musician, and she's embraced the concept of using therapy in music, which I think has an incredible potential. When we're just starting to see it out there. And Kimberley is actually the first of what will probably be many certified as working with the neurology aspect of music therapy. So she's the first in the area, and hopefully people will take advantage of that.
All right, thank you very much, Peter, and thanks, Kevin, for the great little introduction. Yeah, as you heard, I was a musician for a long time, and I still am. And a few years ago, I decided I wanted to just pursue something a little bit more meaningful than just performance, which I love, but it kind of reached a peak for me. So I went to Acadia, and I got my music therapy training, and it was there that I learned about Neurologic music therapy, which is a specialization that is founded by a doctor in Colorado. His name is Michael Tout, and him and his wife have spent the last 30 years or so mastering and really solidifying this idea of neurologic music therapy, and they've now established a program there. And so I went down and I got my neurologic music therapy training just this past winter. And so yes, that makes me the first NMT in Atlantic Canada, and I'm really hoping that within the next couple of years I won't still be the only one. I'm hoping that it can expand quite a lot. So I've got a slideshow here, and I'm going to see if my technology works, and I'll give you just a nice definition of music therapy and kind of the techniques in neurologic music therapy, how it can be applied to Parkinson's disease specifically, and the benefits that can be reaped from it. Okay, so music therapy is the skillful use of music and musical elements by an accredited music therapist to promote, maintain, and restore mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health. Music has several qualities such as nonverbal, creative, structural, and emotional. These are used in the therapeutic relationship. Now that's the key word there, therapeutic relationship. It's not just somebody coming in and playing guitar or piano for some clients, which sometimes it does look that way, but it's always about the therapeutic relationship between the client and the therapist using music as a co-therapist. So it's a trio. There's always those three aspects that are necessary. So this therapeutic relationship facilitates contact, interaction, self-awareness, learning, self-expression, communication, and personal development. So that's a mouthful, but that is the best definition of music therapy because it is so all-encompassing. It includes so many different things, and that is as it is defined by the CAMT. So below that, you'll see just the credentials that an accredited music therapist must receive. The new term is actually certified music therapist. Just in the last few months, they've changed the certification process. Now you have to write a board exam at the end of your internship. So you have to go to school for this, and it's undergraduate or graduate program. The one I did was a graduate certificate program at Acadia. So it has 4 practicums, so you end up with about 60 hours during your schooling, and then you have to complete 1,000 hours of your internship. And then afterwards, you have to write your board exam to become accredited. So this gives you the appropriate skills required to build that therapeutic relationship that I mentioned, and also to carry out the appropriate assessments, goals and objectives, and evaluations. So for me, my specialty is neurologic music therapy. So let's look at that. So it is defined as the therapeutic application of music to cognitive, sensory, and motor functions due to the neurologic disease of the human nerve. Neurologic music therapy is research-based. I'll mention it is the only research-based form of music therapy out there. There are other types of music therapy, other specialties. Nordoff Robbins is one that specializes with children. There's guided imagery in music, which is psychotherapeutic. And NMT is the only one that's research-based and also kind of guided by those principles, those research-based principles. So its treatment techniques are based on the scientific knowledge in music perception and production and the effects thereof on non-musical brain and behavior functions. So there's a list there of some general populations that are served, and you can see Parkinson's is on that list. It is one of the top populations served by neurologic music therapists.
Yay.
So there are three main domains that neurologic music therapists cover, and those would be your cognitive, sensory motor, and speech and language domains. Today we'll look mostly at speech and language and sensory motor domains. Cognitive, with Parkinson's, it's not as commonly used. Obviously there are some areas where it could be used, attention and executive function, for instance. But today we're going to focus on those other two. But first, let's start with the brain, because Parkinson's is a neurological disorder. So let's start there, and we'll kind of work our way outward from there so that we have a good solid foundation. So this is an fMRI study that actually does have nothing to do with music. It shows visual stimulation. So as you can see, can you see the cursor on my screen? Yeah, okay. So as you can see here at the bottom of the skull, of the image, that's actually the back of your skull. So this is looking from the top down. So the top of the screen is the front of your head, and then the bottom of the screen is the back. So that's where your visual cortex is. So here you can see that red is showing activation, the red and orange, and yellow is showing activation. And actually during activation of the visual cortex, you can see your audio cortex is on the side. That blue is actually deactivated. And also take a look at the amount of gray matter that's there. That's all areas of the brain that are not being activated at all. So keep that in mind. And now I'm gonna see if our technology works. I'm gonna play a clip for you. And it's gonna be a song I'm pretty sure everybody here has heard before. I chose one that I hope everybody has heard. While we listen to it, I want you to just think about a couple of things. I want you to think maybe you'll remember something about the first time you heard this song, or a significant occurrence in your life that you can associate with this song. Maybe the lyrics are conjuring up images or something, or emotions, or some sort of feeling, good or bad. Maybe you hate it. Maybe it's your favorite song. I don't know. Maybe your toes are going to start tapping, or your fingers start tapping to the music, to the beat. So just listen to it and think about those couple of things for me. It's only 2 minutes. So these brain images here show the areas that have been activated while listening to music. So just before I go into the detail, I want you to just take a look at how many more areas are being activated. So in the middle image there, the left-hand side is the front of your brain, and then the right-hand side is the back of the brain. Now from the side, it doesn't look like the visual cortex was activated, but if you look on the far right image, you can see that there is activation there. So I'm going to give you another perspective that'll be a little bit easier to explain. This here is an image that I've drawn to try and demonstrate the areas that have been activated while listening to music. So music is actually the only activity that simultaneously stimulates and uses the entire brain. So all of these colored in areas with numbers are areas that were activated, not necessarily just from listening to music or playing to music, but just, it doesn't have to be active participation, but passive participation as well, even if you're listening to it and not paying attention to all those questions I was asking you. So I'll just do a quick little overview here of those areas that were activated. Get my trusty notes here. So we're going to start with the audio cortex. That's number 2 there, that orange in the middle. That's obviously, if you're listening to something, your audio cortex is going to be stimulated. And then you've also got your speech and language areas, number 3 there, the yellow. The Broca's and Wernicke's, while you're listening to music, it's mostly your Wernicke's areas, because that's the perception of language, and then Broca's is production of language. So if you're singing, then you're activating your Broca's area, but if you're listening to music with lyrics, it's activating your Wernicke's area. And then if you look at number 1 there, those brown spots, that's your amygdala and your nucleus accumbens. Those are the emotional reactions to music. So if you like it, or if you don't like it, or if it conjures up some other kind of emotion. And then you've got lots of areas that are actually motor related. So you've got number 6, 7, and 4 in Yes, 6, 7, and 4. So all of those areas are related to motor. So number 6 and number 4, the cerebellum and your motor cortex, are movement. So if you're tapping your toes or, you know, bobbing your head to the music, then those areas are activated. If then with the sensory motor cortex, if you're, let's say you're playing an instrument or even tapping your toes and you can feel your feet hitting the floor, or you know, if you're clapping your hands, you can feel your hands hitting each other. That's the tactile feedback that you're getting from doing those things. Then you've also got your visual cortex is activated most of the time while listening to music, even if your eyes are closed. It's a really amazing phenomenon because, well, I asked you if you could, you know, if you ever thought of any images while you're playing that piece of music. I know for me, I often imagine the scene from The Yellow Submarine while they're playing that song. And, you know, they've got all the bright colors and cartoons. Or also, I know some people often imagine imagery while listening to music, like a you know, a nice field or something, just any kind of an image. So that's your visual cortex. It also is activated while watching musicians. And then number 7 there on the far left is your prefrontal cortex. So that's the expectation and satisfaction and violation of those expectations. So in music, we would call those things cadences. So a music is reaching a certain point, and with that piece of music, I would assume that your expectations were satisfied because, you know, we played the piece till the end. Now, due to technical difficulties, it might have been violated because you know, the sound was coming in and out, so you might not have heard it. Or if I played a different version of the song that didn't quite sound right, and then you're kind of thinking to yourself, this isn't the way I remember it. So that's just a quick overview of the general areas of the brain that are activated through music, which to me is really cool, that it's the only activity that stimulates all these different areas. So I thought it was an appropriate place to start because music therapy, or because Parkinson's is a neurologic disease. So why not start in the brain? So oftentimes, if an area of the brain is damaged, certain things are affected depending on where the damage is. Parkinson's, a lot of it is motor or speech and language related. So you can see that these areas are activated in the brain there while listening to music. Oftentimes you can think of music as a detour to get from point A to point B. If a certain area is damaged, you can use music to achieve a certain task via a different route. I'll go into more detail. I know that sounds confusing. So to start, I just want to mention quickly that Parkinson's it's a damaged the substantia nigra, which is kind of in the middle of your brain there, kind of behind number 2. It's behind your audio cortex. It's right at the base of your skull there, where your brainstem hits the middle of your brain. So it's right in your midbrain, right in the middle there. And the basal ganglia plays a large role in movement initiation, and that's why so many people with Parkinson's are unable to initiate movement. This is where music comes in. Music activates all of your motor cortexes, right? So if somebody is unable to initiate movement, it's really amazing because you can use music to cue that initiation, and oftentimes you'll be able to find that people can respond to that music. Peter, I noticed you were bobbing your head a little bit while we were playing that song. So that right there is a perfect example of a response to music. And it's, you know, it's innate, it's intrinsic. People can't help it. I think it's really interesting if you're walking down the street and, you know, you hear, or a car pulls up to the red light beside you and they're blaring loud music, and all of a sudden you find yourself walking to the beat of their music. More often than not, it's actually more difficult to try not to walk to the beat of the music.
That's funny because Peter sometimes, when he struggles with his words, if he starts to sing them, he's clear.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what, you know, what all this is about, is using music to access those areas of the brain that otherwise are frozen or stuck, and you can't access them otherwise. So to move on, let's just go into how music therapy can help Parkinson's disease. I know I've mentioned some of it already, but so there's active and passive participation. Those are two different types of participation in music, and no matter which one it is, both of those actually increase natural dopamine production. So I know that most Parkinson's drug treatments is L-Dopa or some sort of form of dopamine, and now I know with some people, not everybody, but a lot of that drug is actually rejected by the body because it's a foreign substance, and our bodies generally don't want foreign substances in them. Music is amazing because it's natural and it is not rejected. So you can listen to music and it will not be rejected. There's your dopamine right there. You can also use music therapy as a cue to improve functional movement, and that's a form of neurologic rehabilitation. And we'll get more into that when I discuss the different techniques of NMT. You can also use music as a relaxation tool to help reduce muscle tremors, particularly at night to help with sleeping patterns if they get in the way, or also just to help in any time of the day if you need some form of relaxation. Music can really help with that. And you can see there I've just listed a few of the major symptoms that are often addressed by music therapists. Bradykinesia, your slower movements, dysarthria, which are difficulties with speech, rigidity in muscles, resting limb tremor, and gait instability, such as decreased arm swing, decreased stride length, and increased cadence, shuffling and freezing, and other types of gait difficulties.
So when you say music, can we just get this from listening to music, or like is it a particular kind of music?
Well, no, it's your preferred music, really. You can get it with music that you don't like, but it's usually just preferred music, feel-good music. If you are listening to something and you really enjoy it, and that's where I can also come in, is I can help create playlists. If you wanted to have an iPod on, depending on the application, that's how you choose your music. So if you're using it for relaxation, I probably wouldn't play Eleanor Rigby for you. But I would probably choose something with a slightly slower tempo, and that's where the musical elements portion comes in. When you're thinking about pitch and tempo and rhythm and backbeats and dynamics and all this and that.
And there's something about the beat when you're walking that there's a certain beat that you can listen to that'll prompt you to walk.
Yep, absolutely. I was trying to settle down some videos to show you, but due to my professors in Colorado being in Colorado, we were having some difficulty trying to get them here on time. If I can access them, I would be certainly happy to pass them along. But one really interesting video was of a man who was outside walking, and he got to a curb and needed to cross the street, but all of a sudden his Parkinson's caused him to freeze, and he was not able to step down off the curb. He missed several lights. Every time it turned green, he was not able to start moving. So then in the next clip, he has his iPod on, and he doesn't have music playing. He just has a metronome, so just a tempo, just a steady beat, Yep, exactly. And as soon as he clicks that on, he's right away able to walk across the street, and you wouldn't even know there was any issue. So that's just a simple example, but I'll go into more detail with that particular technique in just a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
So, so these are the different techniques that I was going to get into today. So let's start with speech and language, because it's just, let's just start with speech and language. So there's two different techniques. Like neurologic music therapy has actually over 20 techniques that you can use, and I've narrowed down 5 that are the most commonly used with Parkinson's and also the most effective. You can use pretty well all of the NMT techniques, but these ones are the most effective and the most commonly used. So for speech and language, you've got rhythmic speech cueing, which is the use of rhythmic cueing to control the initiation and rate of speech through cueing and spacing. So this is used to control the rate of speech. That's the key right there. And then we'll go into a little bit more detail in a minute. And then oral motor and respiratory exercises uses musical materials and exercises to enhance articulatory control and respiratory strength and function of the speech apparatus. So that's the kind of the technical side of speaking. So that's your breathing and vocal cord exercises and just different things like that. On the sensory motor side of things, you've got three main techniques. Pattern sensory enhancement is kind of your basis. It's your foundation. It's your small movements and your sequences of movements that can translate into functional movements. So reaching and grasping and lifting and getting from a sitting to standing position, things like that. Activities of daily living, that's where its function lies. Rhythmic auditory stimulation is just what we were just talking about. It's about gait. So it's used to facilitate the rehabilitation of movements that are intrinsically biologically rhythmical. So these are movements that we all have a rhythm to. Everybody has their own rhythm to their walking, to their breathing. Everybody has a heartbeat. So we are rhythmic beings, and RAS taps into that. It taps into your personal biological rhythm and helps you use that functionally in your everyday living. And then there's therapeutic instrumental music performance. It's the fun one. It's where you get to play instruments in a non-traditional manner to simulate functional movement patterns. So we'll go into more detail of each of these right now. So let's talk about RSC and OMRACs. So rhythmic speech cueing is, like I said, the use of rhythmic cueing to control the initiation and rate of speech through cueing and pacing. So rate of speech is the key here. So I've got a simple sentence there. I would like to go to the store today. Now, sometimes people would have difficulty saying something like that. And so what you can do is you can use rhythmic speech cueing to help slow down the pace of speech or speed it up, whatever is necessary. So just an example of how that would work is you would take a client's kind of their natural way of saying it, the way that they're saying it now, whatever pace that is, and you start at that pace. And then you slow it down and you break it down. So you can have a beat going, like if I just clap, and then you say the sentence. I'm going to start out with one syllable per beat, right? So it goes like this. I would like to go to the store today. So you start like that, and then once you've got that down, you can change up that pattern so that you can have it, resemble a more natural speaking pattern. So then you can break it down to 2 syllables per beat. I would like to go to the store today. Right? And then you can also break it down into 3. So
okay, I've got to try this really now. Thank you for letting me go.
There you go. It works, doesn't it? It's really amazing. And you can also go into a triple meter if you'd like. So 1, 2, 3. I would like to go to the store today. And so on and so forth. So you can use that with all sorts of sentences at any time of day. And it's an amazing concept because it's simple to pick up on, but it's amazing how complex it can reach and how far it can go. And then oral motor and respiratory exercises. Like I said, it uses musical materials and exercises to enhance the articulatory control and respiratory strength and function of the speech apparatus. So things like breathing. In this one, you would mostly use sound vocalizations, so not words, just saying ooh, ah, e vowel sounds, or even single syllables like ba, 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 or just any kind of difficulties. This is also a technique that crosses over into children with developmental disabilities. So you can use wind instruments such as a recorder, a harmonica, or a kazoo. And singing, I say singing to free the voice because Well, you mentioned earlier, Peter, that sometimes if you're having difficulty speaking something, oftentimes you can sing it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how singing frees the voice. And that goes back to our brain earlier, is your speech areas in your brain are different from your singing areas. So if you can't say something, you see this in stroke victims a lot too. You can't say something, but all of a sudden they can sing it because it uses a different pathway in your brain. So that's the detour I was talking about.
Next call, Peter's going to be singing and playing the kazoo the whole meeting.
And clapping to myself. Yay, Peter, keep on talking. Yay.
There you go. Well, I've got a little bit of a musical example here. Now, I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it because my keyboard is not terribly loud. I've got it as close to the computer as I can. But can you hear that?
Yep, perfectly.
Good, that's good.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is it's just a simple breathing exercise. So we're just going to breathe in and breathe out. Okay, and now where this is a group discussion and it's over the internet, it will probably not be perfect. But in an individual session, I would obviously choose the tempo to match the client and their own, like they're already their natural breathing pace. You always start where the client is, and if it needs to increase or decrease, then we can do so. So let's just start out. We're going to breathe in for 2 beats and breathe out for 2 beats, okay? So we'll breathe in, breathe out, in, out, in, out, in, and out. So, like I said, I couldn't see any of you at the same time that I was playing that, so I'm not sure how it worked, but basically you use the music as a facilitator to the motion, to the breathing. And we're going to get into that now with the motor side of things. So we're going to start with pattern sensory enhancement. Pattern sensory enhancement uses the elements of music, such as rhythm, melody, harmony, and dynamics, to provide temporal, spatial, and force cues for movements which reflect functional exercises and activities of daily living. So temporal, spatial, and force cues. Those are the 3 aspects that you are always working with. Temporal are your rhythmic cues, so the beat and the rhythm. Spatial are the acoustics, just how does it sound? Like right here, I've got a piano, right? Or I could be on a auto harp or a guitar or my flute, you know, so those are your acoustics, your spatial. How does the movement sound and what is the best instrument that you can use to emulate that? And then your force cues, they're a little bit trickier to define. It's kind of your goal or your cadence. It's where are you working towards in the music and the movement. So when you hear something like this, that repeated note at the top is one of your force cues. And then that cadence at the bottom, the 5-1, is another force cue. That means to restart. So you go over this and, you know, everybody is knowing what to expect, and then you let the music do the work because there's expectations in our brain already as to how music should sound. Like if I went like this, it doesn't have quite the same power as, because it feels more final than, you know, that feels like it needs to keep going, right? Music needs to cadence. And even if you don't understand the terminology or know anything about music, our brains are ingrained to the music to know that it needs to go in a certain direction. So in PSE, you don't use music as an accompaniment. It's the facilitator for the music or for the movement. There are 2 forms of PSE. The first is exercise PSE. So that's using a musical pattern to support the spatial, temporal, and force cues. And it's repeated in order to shape and facilitate an exercise movement. So this demonstration that I just had for you, I'm going to get you to try and do just simple bicep curls, all right? So we're just gonna have our arms laying flat, and I know we can't see each other very well, but yeah, we're just gonna raise our arms up like this. So I'm gonna try what I might do. I don't know if you can see my arm. So we'll just raise our arm up like this and back down. So up and down. So when you hear the music going up, that's up, and then as we repeat, that's the top. And that demonstrates the need to restart. All right, so we're just gonna go, we're gonna move upward and back down. Restart. And so on and so forth. So you can keep going. I'll lower my chair back down so I'm not out of the screen. So you can keep doing that over and over and over again. So it's just basically a way to use music to facilitate the movement. And then you have functional sequence PSE, which what it does is it actually combines several smaller movements to complete a larger movement sequence. So the one that we just did was just a bicep curl, right? If you're sitting in the gym and you're lifting weights and you're doing bicep curls, I know from my experience, it gets boring pretty fast. And you've got 10 to do and you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10 feels like it's forever away. It's amazing though when you add music, all of a sudden you've done 30 or 40 of them and you don't even know, right? Because the music can facilitate the movement and takes your mind off of the exercise of what you're doing. So the functional sequence, we combine those movements such as bicep curls or shoulder flexions. So for instance, you can use it for reaching, grasping, lifting, opening a door using a handle where you need to rotate as well, moving from sitting to standing or laying down to standing. A good example of functional sequence PSE is, think of the motion that it required to eat something. So, you've got your arms down at your side. You need to do a bicep curl, maybe not an entire one. You need shoulder flexion to reach forward. You need to re-extend your arm. You need to rotate your wrist in order to pick up the food. And now you need to bring it back to you. So that's a lot of different motions, right? So the functional sequence PSE can use music to combine all of those. And it's really amazing. And so here's just a few examples of some goals. It increases physical strength and endurance, balance and posture, and functional motor skills. So things you can apply to your everyday life. All right, let's move on now to rhythmic auditory stimulation. This is probably the most commonly used NMT technique with Parkinson's because it addresses gait difficulties. So it's used to facilitate the rehabilitation of movements that are intrinsically biologically rhythmical, like gait. So that's what I was saying before about how we all have a heartbeat, we all breathe to a certain beat, and we all walk to a certain beat. And oftentimes with Parkinson's, that gait is compromised, whether it's shuffling or really fast or really slow. Smaller steps, balance can be affected as well. And like I mentioned earlier as well, when you're walking down the street, you tend to entrain to music that a car is blaring. So that entrainment is key. So just one thing that I've got here is through entrainment, the desired movement frequencies can be achieved. So you can use that entrainment to reach to increase your cadence or to decrease your cadence or to increase your stride length or decrease it, whatever is necessary. There are 4 principles of RAS there, and you've got, well, before we go to the 4 principles, actually, you've got immediate entrainment stimulus, and that's what I was just mentioning, the walking to the beat of the music, that it happens automatically. It happens below conscious levels. You don't even know that it's happening. And then there's number 2 there, which is facilitating stimulus for training. So that is just using the music and then eventually fading it out. So you start with the entrainment and then you eventually fade out the music until you don't need it anymore. Or you just need it for a cue, and then you can turn it off and you can maintain those benefits. So then you've got the 4 principles of RAS. Rhythmic entrainment is the first one. That's walking to the beat of the music. And then you've got priming, which is basically cueing. It's activating motor neurons at your spinal cord level. That's below your consciousness level for the initiation of movement. So it's basically starting the beat, you know, and your brain knows how much space is between this one and the next one. And that's the cueing of the movement, period. So that's the space between the beats. So your priming is knowing where the beat is, and your cueing of the movement, period, is the space between the beats. So let's say I want you to take one step per beat, and I put this beat on. Your brain knows. I bet all of you could start clapping with me, you know, and we could all clap together. And your brain knows how much space is in between the period. It would probably work better live and not over the internet. But so yeah, like our brains know. I don't need to tell you how much time to wait. I don't need to say, oh, wait, you know, 1.5 seconds, or wait half a second before the next beat.
Just go to the beat, feel the heat, do, 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 do.
Yeah, exactly. And then your limit cycle entrainment is actually just, all that is it's moving from where you are to where you want to be. So it's starting at your current pace and increasing it or decreasing it to where you would like your pace to be. So pre-morbid morbid movement frequencies. And here we've got just your goals with RAS. These are the most commonly used goals and benefits that can be achieved through RAS. Increase in stride length, you can take bigger steps, emphasize your heel strike and heel toe gait patterns. So that's starting with your heel and your toe, so that you can decrease toe walking. Because I've got a client with Parkinson's right now, and he walks on his toes. So one thing that we work with a lot is getting his heel down first. And you can use PSE to kind of exercise that heel-toe movement, and then you can translate that into RAS as an actual functional walking motion. And increasing, decreasing your cadence when it's appropriate. Stopping and stop and go to work on your initiation and your coordination. So that's to eliminate those freezing moments. Something like that works really well too, not just walking down the street, but also, you know, at home, you know, because at home, you're very rarely walking in a straight line. You know, you're sidestepping, shuffling, you know, you're working in the kitchen, you're going forward and backwards, and you're shifting from side to side, reaching up and reaching down and pulling cupboard doors out. Or, you know, you're walking down the hall and you need to get to the closet, so you need to stop and you need to turn. So this is where RAS comes in handy, is you can work on those functional movements and work them into your everyday life. And you can also arm swing and trunk rotation, so that's moving your core, you know, without losing your balance as well. Increasing the duration to work on endurance. So if you fatigue after just a couple of minutes, you can use these exercises and increase that endurance. Improve the ability to walk through doorways. I know doorways often have a door jamb at the bottom of them, and that can cause freezing. Or you've got tile change, so, you know, you're going from hardwood to carpet to tile to concrete if you're going outside. And so using this technique, you can eliminate that freezing at those doorways and improving your turning. All right, so that's it on RAS. Moving on to TIMP. This is the fun one. If we were in person, I would give everybody an instrument right now and we would do it all together. So maybe next time. But so TIMP is actually playing of a musical instrument, like a spoon. Yeah, that's a great example. They're usually percussion instruments to exercise and simulate functional movement patterns. So this is kind of combining RAS and PSE into a fun activity. So appropriate musical instruments are selected in a therapeutically meaningful way in order to emphasize the range of motion, endurance, strength, functional hand movements, finger dexterity, and limb coordination. During TIMP, instruments are not typically played in the traditional manner, but placed in different locations to facilitate practice of the desired functional movements. So what I mean by that, I'll give you an example, and I'll also explain bookending at the same time. If we want to work on balance, you can have a client stand somewhere and they can put their arms out to the side, and you can't see the ends of my arms right now, but what I would do is I would place a drum over here and over here. So far enough away that you can't reach them just standing here, but that you need to reach for them, right? And you've got a stick. And what we would do is we could put on, could be pre-recorded music, or the therapist could be playing a guitar or piano. It could be music that already exists, or it could be improvised music, or it really could be anything. So then you've got the client beating to the beat of the music, right? And they're going back and forth. So here you're working on balance, and you're also working on trunk strength. And so you're reaching from side to side, beating to the rhythm of the music. And that's also, when I've got an instrument on both sides, that's called bookending. So for instance, if I just want to work on reaching to the right, I'm not going to just go from middle to right? I'm going to go from right all the way over to left and all the way back to right again, because I need to bookend that movement so that the entire movement is completed. I don't want someone to just go like this and then, they just stay leaned over the whole time and just move their arm, because that's cheating. So I want them to go all the way over and all the way back and all the way over again. And it's really amazing, actually. You can get some really complicated setups where you've got people reaching up and bending over, reaching down, kicking with their feet or marching with their toes. You can't see my legs marching right now, but so you can really use any motion that you can think of. You can place an instrument strategically to facilitate that movement. So I think that's all I've got. If you've got questions, there's just some information there if you want some references. And any questions, you're more than welcome to contact me.
Okay, I guess it's time to go. Oh, let me try it again. I like this rhythm thing. It's time to put the kids to bed. Yay, 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 yay. Dad talks clearly tonight. Let's go to bed, kids. Yay.